This episode is sponsored by our friends at Ycharts. With all the various job functions that advisors are tasked with, your time is extremely valuable and often scarce. Ycharts is a platform centered around efficiency and built with speed in mind. With an intuitive and user-friendly interface, Ycharts helps save advisors 29 hours per month while uncovering better and new investment ideas. Need a way to help clients visualize their financial future, reinforce the importance of consistent investing, and guide them toward informed decisions? Tools for scenario building, portfolio construction, and proposal generation can be the missing piece to your service, so you can act on an idea right when the light bulb flicks on. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube or you read any of the blogs, you'll see we start every YouTube with the Ycharts of the stock price that we're talking about on it, or on the blog, I insert lots of Ycharts into the blog, and there's this reason. It's fast, it's simple, and the charts look really good. Without taking a lot of time, I can get these charts into the videos and into the blogs and worry about writing, making podcasts, doing other stuff. So, if you're interested in Ycharts, click the link in the show notes to get 15% off your initial Ycharts professional subscription when you start your free Ycharts trial and tell them I sent you. All right, hello, and welcome to yet another Value Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Walker. If you like this podcast, a lot of you could rate, subscribe, review wherever you're watching or listening to it. With me today, I'm happy to have on the only man who could get me to record on the Sunday before Labor Day, the founder of MDC Financial, Mike Cohen. Mike, how's it going?
It's going good, and it's great to be here again. And I really appreciate you being able to accommodate my Sunday, because I've been commuting via car to Portland, Oregon from Northern California. And this is really the only day I can do it outside of doing it from a hotel room.
Look, it's a great reason. I know people are going to be excited to have you back. But before we hop into the reason we're recording on Sunday and everything, let me just remind everyone, nothing on this podcast is investing advice. That's always true. But we're going to be talking about a legal case here. I know neither Mike nor myself are lawyers, so not investing advice, not legal advice, not any type of advice. Please do your own work. Consult a financial advisor. Mike, the reason we're having you on, the reason you're commuting, the reason we're talking on a Sunday is Albertsons and Kroger's are merging, are attempting to merge. The FTC is suing to block them. You run MDC Financial. I think it's a must-have if you're any type of investor filing legal situations. You guys are just blasting out emails all the time. But the reason that you're traveling to Portland is you're going to the trial in person for 14 days. So kind of similar to what we were doing with JetBlue and Spirit. This is our halftime report. The first 5 days, the opening statements, some of the plaintiffs' witnesses have testified. We're going to do a halftime report. And then I think we're going to do a follow-up full-time report when the trial wraps up in about 2 weeks from now. So this is our halftime report. I guess I'll just start. If I just backed up, and people can go listen, in December, I had an econometrics on Brian Albrecht, who we talked about the economic case for Kroger and Albertson merging. I guess I'll just start. As you and I sit here, halftime of the merger, if I had to say, hey, what's the score going into halftime? How would you kind of lay out how the case and the score is going so far?
Okay. Well, we have only seen the plaintiff's case, and we haven't even seen the full plaintiff's case. So the only idea really we get from the defendants is how they've done on cross-examination.
Just to be clear, defendants is Albertsons and Kroger's, plaintiffs is the FTC, just so everybody knows what's on.
And there's several states' attorneys general. So sometimes you hear the state of Oregon will call, I believe the state of Washington, state of Colorado, are at a minimum in the audience if they're not, out there at the plaintiff's counsel. But the state of Oregon has been active along with the FTC in calling witnesses. So we should really just think of it as, the government, both state and federal, trying to block this deal. Two very, very large, traditional supermarket chains trying to merge. When I see the map of where Kroger's and Albertsons is, everything on the east is perfectly complementary. They really don't overlap in many areas at all, but for maybe Chicago, a little bit in the Dakotas. It really gets messy, though, when you get like one state west of the Mississippi and west of there. And that's where you start to get a lot of overlay. And so I think the divestitures is going to really play a big part in this merger.
Perfect. I want to dive into a lot of those things, but I guess I'll just start with one other question. A lot of us, I'm locked in my apartment in New York City all the time, or my office a few blocks away. A lot of people dialed in. I think people were laughing at how many people dialed into, because opening and closing statements are available by phone, and then everything else you have to go in person. I think they were about to.
There's a correction to that. Somebody did something wrong on the opening, and I think they recorded something. And I believe the closing is now not going to be publicly distributed anymore.
Oh, interesting. Well, on the opening, if I remember correctly, ARBs were laughing because they were like, oh, this is like going to set a record for most people who've ever dialed into one of these hearings by some multiple. But I just wanted to ask, you've been in the courtroom, and one of the things that I've always found it interesting is especially when I call you, I can be like, hey, what are you reading the body language? And sometimes you'll be like, oh, the judge seemed very relaxed, or, the plaintiff seemed when they heard that, you could almost see them wince when they heard that. Is there anything that's happened in the courtroom that you think somebody who's just kind of, Reuters has published several articles on this, somebody who's just reading the articles might not be missing, or that you might think is, you're kind of seeing because you're there?
There may be body language from witnesses and counsel, but this judge has really given us no body language. She seems to have a inner bliss, and she just warmly and lovingly smiles at everybody, both sides. And I've seen absolutely nothing from her that really gives you a read on what she's thinking of anybody. Even through testimony where people in the gallery are cringing, the judge, is really just a rock up there. She doesn't alter her demeanor in any way based on what's happening in court.
Perfect. Oh, it was really the judge I want to get to, because judges are gods in their courtrooms, and I think all sides have been clear. Whichever way the judge rules is probably how this merger is going to happen, right? Yeah. Judge rules no preliminary injunction, merger's happening. Judge rules preliminary injunction and stops this merger's blocking.
Yeah, and the parties, and I'm wondering how true this is, but the parties really make it, especially the defendants, really make it look like this preliminary injunction is the whole show. That if their preliminary enjoined mergers off, if they're not preliminary enjoined, they're just going to close and let the FTC do what they want to do. There's a new suit in Cincinnati where the defendants are actually suing the Federal Trade Commission on constitutional issues. So this seems to be the most important thing in terms of the merger happening or not.
I think the most critical. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's a 3-week hearing, which is pretty long for a preliminary injunction. So it's really an evidentiary hearing more than a trial. It's scheduled to be 14 days long, and we've now done the first 5 days.
So I think a lot of the preliminary injunction is going to rule, and I think a lot of the juicy stuff comes out on the divestiture buyer and how people think about CNS as the divestiture buyer. I want to put the divestiture buyer aside for a second, because one of the things that initially attracted me to this case is the fight over market definition. And I think you've really seen that so far, right? Like Kroger and Albertsons want the market definition to be very wide, and you've seen them play this. They've said, hey, Walmart, Target, Costco, to say nothing of several others, they are all not only our competitors, but I think somebody from Albertsons even testified like the Walmart and Costco are the people who keep me up at night, not the Kroger across the street. And the FTC has been wanting to say, hey, the market definition is grocery stores. There was a quote from the FTC, I believe it said, where they said, you can't buy one avocado at a club store. And maybe this is the slight libertarian coming out of me. Like I kind of favor, hey, okay, maybe you can't, but people are rational. They'll price fix. But I wanted to ask you, like, the people are rational. They'll go to wherever the prices are lowest and whatever fits them best. But I wanted to ask you, this fight over market definition, Kroger's like more expansive view versus the FTC's. How do you think that's played on both sides? There's been multiple witnesses, from the plaintiffs, but there were multiple witnesses talking about it. How do you think that's played out so far?
There's really been, to the plaintiff's case, kind of 3 themes going on. And the third theme didn't really show up until day 3, and then day 3, and then the beginning of day 4, which is labor.
I'm laughing. We'll talk labor as well. Yeah, I'm laughing.
That's kind of a sideshow, and it's a very entertaining sideshow. But the 3 themes have been, they've been bringing on heads of merchandising and also CEOs of competitive traditional markets like O'Reilly's, but more so the merchandising is from Dollar General, from Sprouts. Things they're trying to differentiate from the market. And these people are testifying that, we don't see the traditional supermarket as our competitor. And then they're also bringing on internal people to both Albertsons and Kroger to show that they think of themselves as competitors. And then pretty much most of this is going to the market definition, but most of the testimony so far. And the FTC kind of looks at the traditional supermarket as the one-stop shop, the one place where you can fill, your whole budget. But nobody does that anymore. When I was a kid, everybody, went to a traditional supermarket, and that's the only place they went. Now, Costco and Walmart make up the majority of people's food budget. And so the one-stop shop is, it's still relevant, but where do you draw the boundaries? So clearly, there's more direct competition from traditional supermarket to supermarket. But the way that the defendants are trying to present it is it's about food dollar, consumers' total food budget. And with them, even convenience stores, I mean, there's some of that food budget's going everywhere, and they look at their competitors in the wide sense. There's an argument to be said for both. We've really just seen the data laid out, so it's pretty clear what the picture is. There's not much of a clue yet how the judge is going to go on this. That being said, from the pricing side, that's how they really started it off in day 1 and 2, especially day 1. And both Kroger and Albertsons, where there's overlap. Where there's not overlap, they're not price checking off each other. And the East Coast looks fine. But wherever there's overlap, they clearly see each other, I believe, as the main number one competitor, with the exception of Kroger's. Kroger's is really seeing Walmart and Albertsons as their competitor. They're trying to compete with Walmart because they have the leading cost structure in the industry, and they're trying to get as good as Walmart in cost and compete with Walmart. And so they really see the ceiling to their pricing as Albertsons, and they try to stay in the range. And there's been a lot of testimony on different strategies, the essential goods, the things that people know the prices on when they shop because they buy it every week. Those are the things they're most competitive on. And then other goods they have higher margins on. And there's a big differentiation of strategy going on with regard to how they price different groups of goods. I've learned more about supermarket pricing in this trial than I ever thought I'd know.
It is a fascinating subject, right? Like, there's a reason that the economists have field days with it, because they're always responding in real time. You're always wondering, like, hey, you lower the price of milk, from $2 to $1.90 and put that in an ad. All of a sudden, you get all this foot traffic in. Or, you think about the Costco $4.99 rotisserie chickens and $1.25 hot dogs or whatever. The reason I want to start with pricing is because the FTC did, right? Day 1 and most of day 2 of the testimony was devoted to pricing. I think the result will hinge on the divestiture, but the divestiture is needed, not needed, whatever your view, in part because of this pricing argument. So let me ask a few specific questions. As you said, just generally, the FTC marched a couple people out there. I think the one from Sprouts Farmer Market was probably the most notable here. And they marched a couple people out there who, Kroger's and Albertsons might say, hey, we compete with Sprouts. And Sprouts came out and said, the old Don Draper, I don't think about you at all. They said, we don't compete with them. We don't think about them. How did you think the testimony and the cross-examination of the kind of government witnesses that said these guys who sell food are not actually competitors, how did you think that went?
I thought the Sprouts witness was fairly convincing. One thing that I thought was really good for the defendants was Mr. Knopf, who's the president of Raley's. Here you have competitors. They're arguing they're not competitors, but they're clearly testifying because they don't want this merger to go through. Right? They're going to all be in a worse place if this merger goes through. And one of the last questions from the defendants was, if this merger goes through, will you be forced to lower your pricing? And Mr. Knopf had to answer yes. And then but that would be good for consumers, right? And he admitted yes, and then he wanted to elaborate, and they cut him off and said thank you. That's how they ended on a high note. So it did kind of appear that you've got a bunch of they clearly compete against both Kroger and Walmart. The competition isn't as direct. They do not want the deal to go through. They would feel greater pricing pressure if they did. It's really about degrees of competition. There is competition with everybody in food, but the only place you got that kind of 100%, perfect overlap competition is traditional supermarkets, the one-stop shop.
I'll just stick with the Mr. Knopf thing, and then we'll come back to the pricing, because one thing Kroger said, and I thought just my read, it would have scored points with me, is Kroger came out and they said in their opening statements, I think they said, when this merger is complete on day one, shoppers will be happy to find price reductions on more than 600 items. And Kroger kept trying to almost take what the FTC was saying and throw it back at them, like, we are going to cut prices. Another place they said is that you mentioned how Kroger kind of prices between Walmart and Albertsons. Kroger said, hey, nationwide, we're 10% cheaper than Albertsons overall. So actually, the FTC should be happy that this merger is going through, because this is a cheaper grocer buying a more expensive grocer. So I just want to ask, that Kroger kind of taking the FTC's argument and trying to throw it back against them, how is that playing in the room to you? How did that come out through the testimony?
I think you just asked really one of the most important questions, because what I'm seeing is there's really two stories here. There's areas where they don't have overlap, and this is a wonderful merger. It will bring down costs. And then there's areas, wherever there is overlap, I as a consumer would have concern, and I would want any overlap within a certain mileage divested. We don't know the full degree of the divestiture. Most of this is under seal. We're now starting to see it come out really in the last 2 days through witnesses from CNS, which is the one receiving the divestitures. If I were a judge, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't practice law or give legal advice, but if I were, or just as a consumer, I would be very happy to see this merger go through anywhere there's not overlap, because clearly Kroger has the leading cost structure. Clearly, they're the only one. I think they're motivated to do this deal to better compete with Walmart and even get a better cost structure. So everybody who shops an Albertsons brand that's not near a Kroger, I believe will see costs and prices go down if the merger happens. And that would clearly be, pro-consumer. With the pricing information I saw in the first couple of days and how they very strategically, they're watching prices daily off each other. I've never seen such a competitive industry in terms of,
You're a liar, because our last one was on airlines, and they monitor each other's pricing very clearly in airlines too.
It was different though, because they actually had an organization that's complicit in broadcasting everybody's prices in real time. Here, they have secret shoppers going around in everybody's stores, and there's a lot of wedge scraping, and there isn't a lot of outsourcing to Nielsen, others.
This is a silly one, but just to further that point, I thought the FTC, it's silly, but I also think it scores points. The FTC had an example where Albertsons, in order to lure in foot traffic, intentionally priced beer below cost for the Super Bowl. To try to look, and then Fred Meyer's, which is one of Kroger's brands, they matched that thing. So it shows you just how responsive they are to others' prices. And Fred Meyer's, I don't know if they kind of figured out, oh, this is going to be a loss leader, or they were just like, we have to. I don't know. But, when somebody sells something under their cost of goods sold and someone else matches it, it shows you like how much they're doing. Because obviously you're not selling under your cost of goods sold for no reason when your competitor is. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything there.
Sure. That was actually for the very large packs of beer. It was like 30 packs. So the people who either are heavy drinkers or having a party. And if you're having a party, you're going to be buying the dip. You're going to be buying everything else.
Yeah.
And Fred Meyer's, they were shocked that Albertsons was willing to do it, but they weren't going to let that business get away. And they matched it and sold under cost.
This episode is sponsored by our friends at Ycharts. With all the various job functions that advisors are tasked with, your time is extremely valuable and often scarce. Ycharts is a platform centered around efficiency and built with speed in mind. With an intuitive and user-friendly interface, Ycharts helps save advisors 29 hours per month while uncovering better and new investment ideas. Need a way to help clients visualize their financial future, reinforce the importance of consistent investing, and guide them toward informed decisions? Tools for scenario building, portfolio construction, and proposal generation can be the missing piece to your service, so you can act on an idea right when the light bulb flicks on. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube or you read any of the blogs, you'll see we start every YouTube with the Ycharts of the stock price that we're talking about on it, or on the blog, I insert lots of Ycharts into the blog, and there's this reason. It's fast, it's simple, and the charts look really good. Without taking a lot of time, I can get these charts into the videos and into the blogs and worry about writing, making podcasts, doing other stuff. So like, if you're interested in Ycharts, click the link in the show notes to get 15% off your initial Ycharts professional subscription when you start your free Ycharts trial, and tell them I sent you. One last thing. So I think all roads are leading to the divestiture, and I'm going to go to the divestiture in 1 second, but I do want to mention Kroger's had some stats where they said, hey, look, you guys are coming at us with the one-stop shop. That's outdated, right? They had some stats saying, hey, 25% of our best customers, we only get 25% of their grocery spend. 75% goes somewhere else. They had some other stats where they said, look, people are willing to drive further for a Walmart, for a Target, for a Costco than they are for a Kroger. So, the market definition for a Kroger Albertsons might be hypothetically 3 miles or a 10-minute drive or something, Whereas if a Walmart's within a 20-minute drive, that actually will compete with 2 Krogers because people will drive the extra 10 minutes to go to a Walmart. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that Kroger defense, because it's interesting. It goes to market definition. It's going to go to divestiture at some point. How did you think that was going?
I believe it. It matches my own. The majority of my spend is in Costco, and I live near Rayleigh's and Safeways, and where they overlap and compete. A matter of fact, Rayleigh's, about 20 minutes up the street from me, is where they began with their first store in the 30s. I use the one-stop shop as kind of a convenience store. Anything that I need, short term is what I go there for. My main spend is at Costco. And while Costco doesn't have all the SKUs, I'll adjust what I'm eating based on just what they have. and I don't think I'm unusual there. I think that the reason that Walmart and Costco is the majority of the food budget at this point, and Amazon is heavily, trying to compete with that. It's a changing of models away from the traditional supermarket into really people being very cost conscious and willing to buy larger amounts to get the best costs.
If this merger is approved, I have been wondering since this was announced and since it was clear the FTC was going to sue, if there was some enterprising like pod shop analyst or something who would go and find out, like stake out the local Costco and see that the judge had a Costco membership. And if they did, be like, I'm max long this, because if you go to Costco, you're probably more likely, as you said, to buy the story that Costco will attract larger. It's a competitor. If you don't have a Costco membership, you might not be as likely. Now, obviously you could still be going to Walmart, or you could be Instacarting, and Instacart hasn't really come up yet. I'm sure that will in the plaintiff's arguments, but I have been wondering if there's like the Costco diligence trick. I want to go to investor, but please wrap it up here.
I was going to say Mr. Knopf of Rayleigh's, the president of Rayleigh's, admitted that his wife has Costco membership and that she shops at Costco.
I do remember that. Let's talk divestiture. So from the beginning, it's been clear that there's been some divestiture needed. There's been, we can talk about just quickly, historically, I believe it was Albertsons was buying Super Value and they divested Source to Haggen's, and that went bankrupt within 18 months. And that has been, it had egg all over the face of the FTC. And I think the FTC has been very skeptical of divestiture since then. So here, the FTC has been worried, are we improving another Haggen's if we do this divestiture? The divestiture buyer is CNS, and there has been a lot of talk. You had a smoking gun transaction exchange on day 4 that people can pull it up. Other outlets reported too, but Albertsons was down 5% on Friday because of what the CNS buyer was saying. So, that's the reason for people going there. I've rambled. I just want to toss it over to you. What are your thoughts on how the divestiture has been presented so far and how those sides are making the divestiture out?
Well, the first witness from CNS was Mr. McGowan, who is currently the head of retail. I think when we see the big picture and we see that it's going to be Susan Morris coming in from Albertson's taking it over, and I think she's going to be a star witness, and that's going to be probably in the defendant's case. I think it'll lessen that, but they did buy divestiture assets from Topps. They showed that what they presented to the FTC did not turn to be true. They showed that they're underperforming now. There was some internal emails even making fun of the retail group, thinking that they can run retail because we're a wholesale company. They did a lot during that testimony to cast doubt over CNS's ability to do it. They made it look like they're out just for the real estate assets, which is 1.9 billion, I believe, of a 2.9 billion deal is just real estate. That does put a floor of risk. It initially, I think, looked fairly bad in terms of there was his deposition testimony is under seal, so we can't see it. But when there was a objection that that's not proper impeachment, the judge overruled it, so she thought it was.
So, Mike, this was in your email, and I just want to back up because I thought this was really interesting. I want to make sure. So, my understanding of what you just said is the CNS expert witness, when the FTC was crossing him, they kept referring to something he said under seal in his deposition and saying he's impeaching himself on the stand. So he's saying something different than he said in the deposition. And the defendants kept objecting kind of for him, right? Saying, hey, he's not, basically saying he's not lying or he's not changing his story here. Like, it's the way the questions are worded. If you said, is it raining outside? I might say yes right now. And 20 seconds later, I might say no because, maybe it's gone from raining to drizzle. I don't know. But am I kind of understanding what happened here? Or do you just want to give a little more color on what the exchange was?
You're understanding it exactly. And there were many times where the judges said that she saw the testimony between the deposition and what he's saying now in court is consistent. And she sustained the objections. But on at least one occasion that and I think it might have been more than one, she overruled the objection, meaning she thought it was proper impeachment. Usually you only bring up everybody who is a witness typically was deposed before. And that's how the lawyers know what his answers are going to be. And so when he deviates from his answers in court, they bring up his deposition, usually for two purposes. One is to refresh the witness as to his memory, and the other is to impeach the witness to show that he's having inconsistent testimony. And if a witness is inconsistent, then you can throw out everything they said because they're not a reliable witness. And so the fact that it appeared that he was impeached makes it look like everything he's trying to say positive, you could just kind of dismiss. And it was shown that his stores are underperforming. That what they said to the FTC at the time of the merger is not how it transpired. There was a lot of evidence that the company in its current state is not good at running retail. There's some internal emails that make it look like they really care about their wholesale business and really don't care about retail. I think Eric Winn's testimony on Friday shored a lot of that up. They really gave the thesis, and I came away personally being convinced that they have a genuine strategy reason and that they actually are into making this deal work. And with the amount of resources that are coming over, especially from Albertsons and people who would have great careers, I don't think they're going to just throw their career out the window by jumping over to CNS unless they, really believe that CNS is committed to being a very competitive retail operator from day one.
There was one point in the testimony, and I want to come back to this impeachment, but there was one point in the testimony where CNS, if I remember correctly, and as you've mentioned, they said they gave the FTC what they called their walnut business plan, and they basically said we lied in it, right? We told you guys that Grand Union, which was the acquisition, was always profitable, but actually it was always unprofitable, and I was kind of like, whoa, that's weird. I want to pause on that and the impeachment because I just laid out, hey, we gave the government something, we said we lied in it, which seems like a Billions plot line, right? And then B, we mentioned the impeachment a few times. You can throw the witness out. I mean, I'm sure most of us non-lawyers, when we hear impeachment, throw the witness out. We're thinking like Good Wife, Law and Order, SVU, whatever, like big dramatic events. And it kind of seems like it. So I just want to pause there. Like, you've got the line to the FTC, maybe you've got an impeached witness. Like, was it as big a disaster as it's seeming when I say this? Or is it, hey, these were minor things. It seems like they got their story straight. They had another witness who came and kind of cleared a lot of it up. Like, how did you read that?
I would say it was a disaster and appeared to be a disaster. I think that Eric Winn, who is the essentially the CEO of all of CNS, including the wholesale side, and he's on his cross-examination, I feel a fair amount was shored up. And it did look, sloppy, the well, I don't know if sloppy or disingenuous is the right word, but they make a lot of money on the wholesale to the markets they're buying. And so they made it look like these stores are profitable when you consider wholesale. And then they went to two separate sources and showed the amount of loss and then the amount of profit from the wholesale. And they basically showed that they're coming up about $1 million a year short. I believe it was per store. Didn't have a good look at the time it happened. And that was during Mr. McGowan's testimony.
And look, if your wholesale business is making $10 million per store, and then you're losing $1 million per store at the storefront, like, you could actually justify, be like, hey, nobody's going to make this store profitable, but the wholesale business is so profitable when we bundle the whole thing up together, like, it still really works for us. That's fine. Like, you could do that, right? It's a loss leader. The store's a loss leader to your wholesale. Go ahead.
I was going to say, if you think of CES or CNS, they're kind of in a better position to have a bad period or go through more transition difficulty because they're going to be making it up on the wholesale. If somebody just jumped straight into this and had to do any rebranding or anything and had, difficulty, I think they'd be less likely to be able to go through that hardship.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it was actually going to be my next question. So I'll jump there. I will come back to this in 1 second, but Albertson's said in their, I believe it was Albertson's, not Kroger, who said in their opening statements, hey, we actually think CNS is better than either Kroger's or Albertson's as a retail operator because they have the wholesale and they have the integration. They're way bigger than either of us. And that struck me as kind of crazy. I was like, I cannot believe they're arguing this company that's about to come out that they were running unprofitable retail stores, 100 of them. I'll mention data science in a second. I can't believe they're arguing that, but it sounds like you're saying, hey, they may have laid the groundwork. And again, this is the halftime report. We're going to hear the defendants call witness and do their testimony, but it sounds like they might be laying the groundwork for that successfully being an argument, is what I'm hearing.
I think there's a great bridge into starting to talk about Eric Winn's testimony. He was the president of CES. He was essentially the only witness on the last day. We got off at lunchtime. So we started at 9, we got out, I think it was 12 or 12:30. That was all Eric Winn. I thought he was an excellent witness. And I think he was the only excellent witness that was a CNS employee to date. He gave me a reason why I believe that they're committed to retail. I came away from the previous day with all kinds of suspicions. They're going to cherry pick and keep half the stores and close half. They're doing this to broker it out to their wholesale customers. Later, they're in it for the real estate. A lot of the dispersions that were created the prior day were large in my mind, and I feel Eric Winn cleared a lot of that up. They lost I believe it was in 2019. I think it was like 44% customer. It was a huge customer. And they moved to self-distribution. And they realized that if the direction of competition for their wholesale business is more and more people might be self-distributing. And then there's clearly synergy with self-distributing. Part of my own suspicions was you don't want to compete with your customer. And customers would be really defensive about that. And there was an email where he was assuring a customer, we're not really that committed to retail. Our wholesale business is more important. There was asks about, can you sell them? Like, I guess he wanted to be a buyer. We can't talk about that yet. And then the testimony was that's when they were talking to the FTC. So they, like he didn't want to put it in email, to start pricing and beginning brokering the stores out. It looked really bad. When I saw Eric treat it as that's a really good question as to the not wanting to compete, and that the very first thing he did was look at the overlap of where his customers are and the stores are. And then he saw that these are assets where I can be in regions where I don't have strong customer presence. That's exactly what a CEO would do if he was really interested in truly just diversifying the business into retail and having a different direction.
Not only that, but it also look, if there's 100 grocery stores in one area and one company's serving 50 and one company's serving 49, right? Like you and my wholesale distribution, we're never going to be able to get it in there because there are local economies of scale to distributing, right? So it could also be, hey, I'm going to go into these places where I'm historically weak. I'm not pissing off any of my current customers because they don't have anything there. And hey, I can actually go compete in these places because I can use myself, kind of what Amazon has historically done with a lot of their stuff, right? They spin up AWS because they're using their retail services to bootstrap it. Like I could imagine a world where that would happen.
And
go ahead.
They started on the East Coast. They're more of an East Coast business, and that's and most of the divestitures are West Coast. They showed their map of, they're national, but they have big holes in the Midwest. Exactly, some places you're getting stores. So it has synergy with their wholesale and distribution business. In markets like Los Angeles and things, the reason that Kroger and Albertsons are both there is they're great markets. And if they can get a great cost structure to compete with Kroger, those might be good localities to be in.
One last question on CNS, if you don't mind. At one point, it came out that CNS didn't have any data scientists on the retail side, and I thought that was crazy based on everything we talked about, where Kroger's, Albertsons, Walmart, they're all like looking at each other's pricing daily, doing all this data sciences. But I was kind of wondering, I could paint that on one side. Hey, point for the FTC. CNS does not care about this retail division. They're not even hiring data scientists. Like they're not doing the basic blocking and tackling. Or I'm sure the defendants, when they come out and they have their experts, they're going to paint it as, hey, CNS is understaffed right now, but when they inherit this great Albertsons team with their data scientists, like they're going to have a real shot at retail going forward. It was just a throwaway line there, but I wanted to ask you kind of what your read are. Obviously, I've led the witness in a little bit here, but it just kind of what your read on that lack of data scientists was.
So we really have two different things going on in terms of the FTC, especially with Mr. McGowan, was showing that this is a completely inept company in retail. It cannot handle this. They did a very good job of that. What we saw later is that this is super transformative for the company. And most of the, you're not going to be hiring and building up your retail unless the merger goes through. So we're talking about the current and past state of the company versus the future if it does go through. And I think it was something like 16,000 employees they expect to come over from the Albertson side. And I think it's like 1,000 are in management. and Susan Morris, who's like a superstar in managing supermarkets, she's going to be coming over and become the new president. My questioning is, why didn't they let Mr. McGowan go before the testimony? As opposed to demoting him, if the merger goes through afterwards. I at this point believe that it's transformative, and it'll be a completely different company. The data scientists and everybody, will probably be there post merger. But it does give a lot of questioning as to, you have no historic track record. Right, you're talking about something that's transformative. The promise is there, But how will it play out? It does look like a very risky situation, and this kind of bridges into rebranding. I was surprised by the amount of rebranding. It seems like it's almost half the stores, and there's some emails internal to CNS. Kroger's giving their worst brands, and those are the ones you're going to rebrand too as kind of their own brands. There's a lot of goodwill to make up, and a lot of the testimony from, especially like Mr. Knopf with Rayleigh's, who and others who had experience with rebranding. Rebranding is very, very difficult, seemingly, and I came away that if you rebrand, you are going to lose a lot of the current people who have been shopping at the store and love the store, and it's almost like opening a store. And I think it's very disruptive to rebrand. And there's seemingly quite a bit of rebranding that's going to need to take place. And that does put a lot of question marks in terms of how those will perform.
I was surprised by the testimony on rebranding, because to me, maybe it's just because I'm a dum-dum, but I just thought, I remember when I was a kid, the local shop got bought by Albertsons, and they changed to Albertsons. And my mom and I still went to the same place every week because, it was the closest place. It was a 5-minute drive. And actually, I remember being kind of pumped because they switched to Albertsons and the store got noticeably cleaner. But I was 12 at the time. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and they're putting a lot of money into the stores. There is going to be, remodels and refreshes, and the smarter place to put the money is on the ones you're rebranding. So everybody who comes in that one time to see what the new store is like sees it as an improvement. And I think that it, could go very well. At this point, I do feel that CNS, could operate the stores. And to me, I think the most important thing that I don't know the answer to yet, and I probably won't know until the defendants put their case, is how, after these divestitures, is there still areas of overlap? Is the divestitures very complete? If so, I, as a consumer, would be pro-merger. If there's areas and markets where there's, still in close proximity that weren't not divested between Albertsons and Kroger, I see that as a problem. I would want a very complete divestiture.
Let me come. Speaking of divestiture, I agree with you, and obviously this is shaping out a divestiture that takes away all the places where Kroger and Albertsons are going to have a monopoly or something is basic blocking tackling for antitrust. I just want to come back to, at the start of this segment, I mentioned Haggen, right, which was the divestiture package in 2015 or so. Divest 100 or so retail stores. The divestiture fails almost immediately, and I believe it was Albertsons is buying them back for a song, a year later. Haggen, I think, looms large over this divestiture package because the FTC is saying, hey, in that case, you sold, if I remember correctly, it was a company that ran 8 grocery stores. You sold them 120. They couldn't manage them. They filed for bankruptcy soon. FTC is trying to paint parallels here, right? CNS has 15 grocery stores. Sure, they're a big wholesaler, but they're everything we talked about in this is they're painting CNS as unable to run grocery stores. They're saying, hey, this will be Haggen 2.0 if you publish this. They're buying it maybe just to get the real estate. They're going to sell it. They're going to shut it down. And all these consumers are going to be left with a monopoly, right? The divestiture will have failed. Albertsons and Kroger's are clearly trying to counter that. We've talked about why to trust CNS and everything, so I don't want to talk about that specific part. I just want to talk about, to you, how has the Haggen just parallel overviews, how has that framed this discussion, and which side do you think is kind of doing a better job of painting this as this is Haggen 2.0 versus this is not Haggen?
I would say so far the FTC's been doing a better job painting the picture. And it's not just Haggen, it's a long history of flirting with retail and failing. So they went into retail, they made a decision to exit retail in 2010, they sold all their stores in 2012.
The they you're referring to is CNS has a history with
Correct. And I should have made that clear. And then CNS, during the periods before, they were still acquiring stores, but mostly to broker them out and sell them to their distribution customers. They almost looked like they went into the business of brokering supermarkets, of acquiring and selling. with no intention to operate. And then, the Haggen fiasco where they declared bankruptcy, and then the Piggly Wiggly stores. They got them from Tops, and this was, I think, 2019-ish. And that was what Mr. McGowan was in charge of. And they're still running these. So all they're pointing to as their current experiences running is this handful of Piggly Wiggly stores in the Chicago area, and they also have stores in Wisconsin, and they're underperforming. It didn't look like a company that's committed now to retail. It looks like, we've seen this story before, and is this part of the long history of the company not really taking retail serious and just being committed to its wholesale business? Or is this time it's different, where it's truly transformative? The number of the stores and the amount of people look like truly transformative. The history of the company and the roots of the company, and even some internal emails that they had with customers, looks like it's 2.0 of their history is worse than anything that happened in the past.
That's true. Though, as I've said, this is a halftime report. I just based on my reading of your email, so I'm just parroting back to you. I agree with you, but this is obviously so far only the plaintiffs called. So I think the defendants have a lot to shore up, but they will have an opportunity to shore this up. Let me go to a different place. Day 3 was all about the workers, right? The FTC, to a lot of people's surprise, has included in this suit not just, hey, you're going to have a monopoly in local markets X, Y, and Z if this merger goes through. Hey, this divestiture is a bad package, so it should be blocked. They've also included, hey, Albertsons and Kroger's are both union shops. If you let this go through, then union workers, they're going to have a monopoly on union workers in local markets, and you should block it on that organized labor reading. I have historically thought that was a poor argument. I don't think anything's ever been blocked on organized labor before, but I will say the FTC kind of has, the DOJ had the case where the DOJ successfully blocked a merger because it was 2 publishing houses that were going to merge. And they said, hey, high-end authors aren't going to have enough publishing houses if this happens. So I could kind of see parallels there. Day 3 was all about organized labor. They had I'll let you tell the story, but they had the labor chief who came, testified, and then did a press conference on the court's doorstep and confirmed in the testimony. But how do you think the labor arguments is going? What's going on there? All of that type of stuff.
The labor, I thought, was some of the most entertaining testimony. And, right when I came in the courthouse on day 1, there's the unions giving a press conference side by side with the line of lawyers that are entering the court. And all the cameras and all the press are, it's not that great filming a line of lawyers going into the courthouse. So they're, the unions were getting a lot of attention. I, at this point, feel it's a sideshow. I don't think it's going to be determinative. I came away feeling like the unions, Mr. Clay specifically, I think he's the local 555 up there. It kind of gave the appearance that he's taking advantage of the merger, to get a better deal with his current negotiation. So it was admitted he's currently in negotiations with Kroger. It was admitted that he currently was in favor of the deal and put out a press release. Both him and Mr. Winn testified about their original meeting, which was back in January, I believe, of 2024. And, everything seemed positive. And the timing, it was, I believe, in August. It was very recent when he switched and started opposing the deal.
It was like 2 days before the trial, right? Because I think he published in January, he published a PR that said, I support this. And then like 2 days before the trial, he said, take backsies.
I have it in my email, but I think it was August 18. I could be wrong and refer to my email. But yeah, it was like a week before the trial. Then it looked like they took a strike vote right away when he flipped. So he had the approval for the strike. The strike was only announced the day before his testimony. The strike took place the day of his testimony. He gets on stand. He's going to leave the stand and go downstairs and hold his press conference. And he's in current negotiations with Kroger. And then when I hear the arguments as to, why it's bad for unions, there wasn't enough there to overcome the current optics. I kind of view the whole labor issue as a sideshow.
I do too, though. That actually brings us nicely into this case has become politicized, right? Like Kamala Harris has talked about high grocery prices on the campaign trail. I believe she specifically mentioned this merger. It's obviously like, even though in the grand scheme of things, two grocery stores merging is very small versus we mentioned Walmart, Target, it's a local thing and people have been, between that, the labor case and everything, there is an air of politics to this. I just want to, is that infiltrating? I think it might have, just because labor's mentioned, but is that infiltrating the arguments here at all? Are you feeling that in the case, or do you think the case is still kind of blocking and tackling?
I feel everything in the courtroom is fine, and I don't think the politics have entered. That being said, the press that's been coming out of the courtroom has really been highly politicized and really latched on this one specific testimony of where egg prices was very volatile.
You beat me to it. You beat me to it. I was going to ask about this email.
Walmart lowered the price of eggs, and Albertsons didn't. Now they're price checking off Albertsons. So when Albertsons didn't move, they didn't move either. And it looks like, they're getting higher margins on eggs. And so a comment of price gauging / price gouging from someone who's currently running for president, looked all of a sudden plausible where there was, prior no evidence that anybody could point to. That to me it looked like is a one-off product in a volatile pricing. It seemed like that was way overblown by the news stories that came out of there compared to what actually happened in the courtroom.
I was going to ask you about that. There's another, just to give the other side of it, there is a Albertsons president who has a quote, I think it was from email, but it might have been in testimony, where he says, hey, look, when it comes down to it, Albertsons is hopelessly higher priced than both Walmart and Kroger. And I was just kind of laughing at you, an employee admitting, hey, yeah, like our cost structure we're pretty boned over here. That actually does take, unless you want to comment, that takes me nicely to the last check I wanted to. It felt like Albertsons, some of the stuff they've said, it felt a little bit Spirit-like in the point that they're saying, hey, if you issue this preliminary injunction and this merger doesn't go through, it's going to be bad for consumers. Albertson's higher price than Kroger's. If you issue this preliminary injunction and the merger breaks, we don't have a backup plan. Our backup plan, Cerberus controls us. Our backup plan is, we're going to have to sell off stores. We're going to have to shut down stores. We're going to have to sell ourselves to a big bad private equity. It felt like almost they were saying, hey, you need this merger to go through, because if it doesn't, the plan B is even worse for the consumer. And it did remind me of Spirit saying, and it has played out, Spirit saying, hey, if you don't approve this merger, we're going to have to do a lot of the merger stuff ourselves, but without JetBlue to protect us. We're going to have to cut flights. We're going to have to raise prices. Like, you can either do it through this merger or we can do it on our own. But one way or the other, it's going to be bad. How has that played just when you've been in the courtroom?
So I thought some of the most honest and convincing testimony there was Mr. Clay, the laborer, why he was originally for the deal.
Yes.
He met with CNS and he says, here's a guy who's committed to the industry. He wants to make better stores and and invest in the stores, and better stores are better for better workers. And it looked like he flipped because he started talking to a lot of other unions that dealt with CNS, and it made it sound like CNS has a very kind of anti-union mentality. And the information he subsequently got is his explanation for why he switched. He also alludes to information that he got while in negotiations with Kroger. There wasn't a lot of specificity, but he learned things in that negotiation that allowed it, made him flip. But his original belief is CNS is committed to the industry. And he saw a, private equity firm that owns the majority of Albertsons, that the writing on the wall is we're hopelessly high priced. We're going to be the loser against Kroger, and we want out. And they're going to get out one way or another. And he saw the alternatives as worse.
This episode is sponsored by our friends at Ycharts. With all the various job functions that advisors are tasked with, your time is extremely valuable and often scarce. Ycharts is a platform centered around efficiency and built with speed in mind. With an intuitive and user-friendly interface, Ycharts helps save advisors 29 hours per month while uncovering better and new investment ideas. Need a way to help clients visualize their financial future, reinforce the importance of consistent investing, and guide them toward informed decisions? Tools for scenario building, portfolio construction, and proposal generation can be the missing piece to your service, so you can act on an idea right when the light bulb flicks on. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube or you read any of the blogs, you'll see we start every YouTube with the Ycharts of the stock price that we're talking about on it, or on the blog, I insert lots of Ycharts into the blog, and there's this reason. It's fast, it's simple, and the charts look really good. Without taking a lot of time, I can get these charts into the videos and into the blogs and worry about writing, making podcasts, doing other stuff. So, like, if you're interested in Ycharts, click the link in the show notes to get 15% off your initial Ycharts professional subscription when you start your free Ycharts trial, and tell them I sent you. Perfect. I have one last question for you, but before I ask the last question, we've gone through all my notes. I think we've done a nice job of covering so far. Again, we've had 4 days of 14 of the trial. I think we've done a nice job. But is there anything that I didn't hit in the trial that you think we should have hit? Anything else that kind of top of your mind that you think it was important so far?
The top of my mind is really to what to watch for from here going forward. And I don't feel I have a great handle on the, at this point in the trial, the totality of the divestitures. I want to see the defendants show me that there's not areas of overlap within a certain, miles of stores. If the divestitures are very complete, I think the deal should go through. I'm currently of the impression that it's not, and that there should have been, more divestitures, and I think any area of overlap, I think, could block the deal. And I lean at this point towards the FTC. That could all change in the defendant's case. I also think that there's a lot of dispersion of CNS's both ability and intentions. And I think Susan Morris is going to be the star witness to, convince the courtroom that this is transformative, and her ability to do it. And, probably a lot of questioning on how they're going to pull off the rebranding without, much impact negatively, and a lot of the strategy there. So I think, CNS's ability as a competitor, I think, will likely be shored up in the defendant's case. And, shoring up the history of the company with failed forays into retail, that needs to be done. And the number one thing I really think is the completeness of the divestitures. I think that if there's complete divestitures, this is a good deal for consumers. Consumers should be, really wanting this deal so that all the prices can go down in Albertsons that aren't near a Kroger's. But any area of overlap, the person in that market would probably be unhappy.
No, that's great. Look, you mentioned it. My last question, you started to allude to it, but I have to ask you. I know you don't love it, but as we sit here at halftime, again, the FTC has presented their case. Albertsons and Kroger's have not. But as we sit here at halftime, you said you're leaning towards the FTC case. It seems like that can be turned. But if I had to give you, hey, here's the odds, what would you put the odds for the FTC at right now? Do you think they're 75% likely, 55? Where would you put it?
That's a tough thing. And the reason I say that is there's so much that could happen going forward that could completely flip me. At this point, I'm probably 70-30 in favor of the FTC. I think right now the deal looks bad. But I could completely flip if I was convinced that the divestitures give no area of geographic overlap.
It sounds like, again, a lot of this is under seal, but it sounds like if they came out and they held up a map and they said, Mike, there's only 100 stores in this circle where we have overlap. Those are the only overlap stores, and every one of the stores in this circle is getting divested to CNS. It seems like that would flip you to the Albertson side. Now, we'd still have, does the judge believe CNS is a credible buyer? But it seems like that's what it would require to flip you.
Even a simple statement as post-merger, there will be no area of overlap within 20 miles. That would be enough for me.
And obviously, you can have overlap if there's like 4 other grocery stores there or something. You need no monopoly overlap.
I would even say, even if there's other stores and it's a crowded metro market, the degree from day one of how these stores look to each other, are pricing off each other. I really think that there should be a geographic boundary, that there's no overlap within a certain number of miles. Arbitrary, I might say 10, 20, 30 miles, but there should be a distance that people normally wouldn't travel to a traditional supermarket for, and there should be no stores within that range. If there was that level of divestiture, I, as a consumer, would be super positive on this deal. And I believe that CNS, with the transformation that's coming over, and the number of resources from Albertsons, I think they could probably do as good of a job as anybody.
Well, this is a tough one because the merger has been stuck here for so long. And Albertsons has built up so much cash, but the Albertsons business performance has been tough. It's tough for me to say what the market is pricing the odds of this is, because it's tough for me to ascribe a downside to Albertsons. It's already trading at 4.5 times EBITDA. So I would say, hey, you're leaning FTC. It feels to me, based on my talks with the other ARBs, that people are feeling that way. But I can't tell you because I don't have. It's underfollowed in the investment community right now, and I don't have a strong downside. But I'll try to firm that up before we do our follow up with, we'll have, hey, did Kroger and Albertsons manage to present this to Mike in a way that he thinks it is? But Mike's going to come on for a follow up once the trial completes in about 2 weeks. Mike Cohen, I'm going to include a link in the show notes if you want to email him. But I just want to, at the start of the next episode, remind me to put this in the front because we need to have it in the front. But I wanted to include 2 quick things. When we were talking Spirit JetBlue, I believe you told me this offline, but I feel comfortable saying it at this point. You were at the trial and there was a point made, and you told me the guy sitting next to me was a consultant for someone with Hawaiian, Alaska. And when he did that point, he pumped his fist and he was like, this was like a week before the merger happened, but it came out when he pumped his fist, he was like, that's what we were looking for. And then the Hawaiian Alaska merger got announced. And that deal was fraught, but just this month, the DOJ cleared it. And the whole time I was thinking, damn, like I'm sure there was a lot going on, but Mike had it like, that is the best scuttlebutt I've ever heard, where a consultant was like, that was the point we needed the DOJ to make and the judge to make. And they cleared it, and the market didn't. Go look at the Hawaiian stock price. No one thought the DOJ was going to clear that, but that went cleared. And I was thinking of you the whole time. So I need to tell that story at the start of the stock price because people are going to want that story. But look, people should subscribe to Mike. I love it. You cover so many different things, and the world is getting more litigious, and these things are getting crazier and crazier to follow. I've talked on this podcast a lot about Liquidia. I know you cover it because you send me the emails every day. I mean, that all the mergers and all the lawsuits and the fall on there, that's gotten crazy. You've got this Hawaiian Spirit, like the world is getting crazier, more litigious. And if you're trying to follow it, especially as a generalist, you need Mike. So Mike, thanks so much for coming on. You can say anything to that if you want to add on to it.
I just say thank you for the kind words. And people can look us up at mdcfinancial.com. And I always enjoy being on your podcast, and I look forward to the next one.
I appreciate it. So we'll have you back on in a couple of weeks when this follows up, and looking forward to it. Thanks again, Mike.
Great. Thanks.
A quick disclaimer. Nothing on this podcast should be considered investment advice. Guests or the hosts may have positions in any of the stocks mentioned during this podcast. Please do your own work and consult a financial advisor. Thanks.